So I'm going to let you guys do most of the talking today. So you guys on Zoom, I'm still going to ask you to kind of chime in here. Let me turn up my volume so the class can hear. So we're just going to run through each of these. And I do want to say, this is the information you're responsible for. So this is the end of this chapter's PowerPoint. I just, like I said, printed out those or put those slides into a separate document, but this is what you need to know about the organelles, the information on these slides. And hopefully that activity is just a good way to help them stick a little bit better in your mind. Cell membrane, I don't have on here because I'm going to be talking about the cell membrane on Monday. I was going to try to finish it today, but I can't really talk, so we're going to do it Monday. So let's start with that. Let's start with the cell membrane. What analogy do you guys have for the membrane? And you guys on Zoom, feel free to chime in.
In my group, we said the cell membrane is kind of similar to like police that protect the city.
Yeah, police that protect the city. What'd you guys say? The military that protect the city. Yeah. So, yeah, I should have. Yes, I'm glad you guys kind of went out from. It's not just like buildings and structures. Yeah, like other aspects of a city. So yeah, some kind of like border patrol around a city that's monitoring what's going in and out. Right. It's really important. Cells don't just let anything in and let anything out. It's very controlled. Good. That's an awesome analogy. Okay, so now let's move into the cytoplasm. How about the cytoplasm? That's kind of a tough one.
I said the atmosphere because it kind of surrounds like all the buildings and everything, and just like the cytoplasm goes around all the organelles.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So this is just water and nutrients that all of these, different structures are sort of floating in, right? So yeah, you can think of it as the atmosphere or like a swampy kind of land mass, I guess. So yeah, something to do with that, something surrounding. Anyone else have a good idea for cytoplasm? Someone also said like the water tower kind of, because it's water in the cell. So use whichever of those is most useful to you. Okay, so we got cytoplasm. How about cytoskeleton? Cytoskeleton, anyone?
You said like a wall, like gate kind of outside of the cell.
Like it surrounds the city.
The gate that surrounds, okay, that surrounds the city. So that could be part of it. Yeah, so some kind of structural reinforcement almost, or like some kind of structure, like solid structure. And it runs throughout the internal part of the cell too. So yeah, anything structural. So I thought like, not that there's citywide scaffolding, but like some kind of citywide scaffolding that is holding the city up in a way. It also, did anyone have anything different? I had another idea for this too, and someone else came up with it.
I thought about it almost as like a mayor, because they like delegate rules and stuff that keep the city in order, and they give the city structure.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So sort of like a mayor that, structures the city. Someone actually said that exact same thing in the 8 a.m. class. Good job. I also heard someone else say it directs movement. So it's really important in like shipping stuff around. So it could be like railroad tracks or a subway or like a road system where it connects these different pieces of the cell. So cytoskeleton can be a number of different things. How about the centrioles? The centrioles are a tough one. Whoops. Okay, so before we get into that, sorry. You don't need to be able to recognize these different aspects of the cytoskeleton. So for you guys on Zoom, I know I'm not sharing my screen, but hopefully you can see this. It's the pictures of the different filaments. Just know the names: microtubule, microfilament, intermediate filament. I'm not going to ask you guys to distinguish between the different ones. I just wanted to show you that there's a variety of different filaments that are making this cytoskeleton. Okay, centrioles. I had an idea for centrioles. It's a tough one.
We said police officers for that.
Okay, why police officers?
Like they play an important role in enforcing cell structure, and police play a role in enforcing law and stuff.
Yeah, so enforcement of cell structure. Yeah, and that's a good idea. So for you guys on Zoom, if you couldn't hear, she said police because they reinforce cell structure. and kind of tell the cell in a way what to do with certain aspects, particularly cell division. So cell division, this is going to be really important in mitosis. Does anyone else have an idea there?
I said a whole different thing. I said that they're kind of like households where information is passed from the parent to the children.
Okay, so more along the lines of, yeah, the cell division,
division.
taking the information from one generation to the next. I could see that, yeah. All right, so we'll come back to centrioles when we talk about mitosis. Like I said, they're really important when you actually separate cells. Okay, why do I keep going to that computer? Okay, the nucleus. This one's kind of easy. What different ideas did you guys have for the nucleus? So I said City Hall. It's pretty boring, but did anyone have anything different from that?
We said the White House.
The White House, yeah, so like a massive City Hall, basically, right? Like yeah, good. So the White House kind of directing everything. Anyone else? Okay, I think you can kind of think of a cell, if we're thinking of it as a city, almost like a fascist dictatorship, because the nucleus is telling the cell everything to do. So nothing else really gets a vote in the cell. The nucleus is telling it exactly what to do and exactly when to do it. So that's a really important aspect of this kind of governing body within the cell. It holds all of the genetic information, obviously, which is important for future generations of cells. And then a few other important aspects on the next slide here. We'll talk about chromatin when we get into the next chapter, chapter 4. This is also where ribosomes are made. So ribosomes are made here, and then we'll talk about them and what they do in just a minute. But those are really important aspects of the nucleus as well. But it doesn't really take direction from the rest of the cell. It tells the cell what to do. Okay. All right, the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum. So we kind of have the smooth side and the rough side. You guys can give me an analogy for kind of both of those combined, or I would say both combined is probably easier. What do you guys have for ER?
GNC.
GNC, like nutrients?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So for you guys on Zoom, he said GNC. So like basically providing a lot of those macromolecules, right? So this is, the rough ER is going to make proteins basically because it has ribosomes on it. The smooth ER is making a bunch of different lipids, phospholipids and steroids primarily. So yeah, this is something that makes a lot of different molecules. The ER is critically important in making all these macromolecules that we just went over. So yeah, you can think of it as like a factory or something like that, like making a bunch of different macromolecules, nutrition store, something like that. Does anyone else have anything for ER? Okay. So the ER, the smooth and rough, are essentially the same part, the same aspect, or the same organelle. The rough ER just has these little ribosomes on it, so it makes it look rough. The smooth ER doesn't. The smooth ER is really important in detoxification of like alcohol and drugs. The rough ER, obviously really important in protein production because it has the ribosomes, right? Okay. You can also think of this sort of as another railroad track system because things get shipped all the way through it. They're all intermingling, and it's a way that molecules are not only made, but then moved towards where they need to eventually go. All right, how about ribosomes from you guys in the back? I haven't heard from you yet. Would you say a ribosome would be? Oh, you skipped ribosome? Okay. Do you guys have something for ribosome?
We had two different answers.
Okay, shoot.
But I put local construction company.
Okay, why? What's your reasoning?
Because, okay, so they package stuff,
Yeah.
like proteins and stuff, or they build them. And I was thinking about like this construction company in my town that builds it like on the restaurants and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. So for you guys on Zoom, she said ribosome is kind of like a construction company. So it is, it's constructing proteins. It's taking individual pieces, stringing them together and making proteins. When you think of ribosome, think proteins. So I think that's a perfect analogy. Did anyone else have anything different? I kind of think of ribosomes as sort of along the lines of GNC, but like little gyms, because I don't know, I think of muscles and protein, and I think of them as like little muscle builders. All right, that's ribosomes. Yeah, so they're reading genetic codes to make proteins. That's what ribosomes do. All right, how about Golgi? Do you guys have something for Golgi? No? Okay. Okay, all right, awesome. Does anyone on Zoom have anything for the Golgi apparatus? This one's actually pretty easy.
We have one.
Okay, never mind Zoom people, you lost your chance. All right, go ahead.
We put the post office
Yeah.
because it packages molecules and sends them throughout the cell, just like the post office.
Yeah.
packages mail.
Perfect. Exactly. So the Golgi is often referred to as kind of the post office of the cell. So it makes it puts finishing touches on a few things, but it also packages it up into these little Golgi vesicles. And then those Golgi vesicles bud off and then go to where they need to go, either within the cell or to the cell membrane to be shipped outwards. So the Golgi is kind of the packaging and processing center of the cell. Carbohydrates sometimes are added onto proteins. Some proteins are cut. And then eventually, like I said, they enter these Golgi vesicles and get sent on. So Golgi is almost exactly like a post office. Oh, keep going. All right. How about lysosomes? You guys had some for lysosomes?
We said waste management.
Yeah, exactly. So lysosomes are kind of like the waste management system of a city. You can think of them as like a garbage truck or waste treatment plant, I guess, like maybe a sewage treatment plant. Did anyone else have anything? Anything different from that? Okay, that one's pretty straightforward actually. So lysosomes and peroxisomes that group together, they basically do the same thing. These are like little balls of enzymes that are breaking things down that the cell does not need anymore. So lysosomes are breaking down macromolecules, any extra organelles. So autophagy is where the lysosomes are basically eating the organelles that aren't needed anymore. They're also responsible for what's called autolysis, and that's where it's called cell suicide. So that's where the cell actually eats all of its internal components and essentially eats itself. And I don't know what the final step is there, but autolysis is where the cell is actually completely deconstructing, and lysosomes are what are responsible for this. Peroxisomes, just a little bit different. They just have different enzymes, but they're still breaking stuff down. They have a bunch of enzymes, they're breaking stuff down. They're really important in detoxification of alcohol and drugs, as well as bloodborne toxins. So any kind of toxin you have in your blood, peroxisomes are good at breaking that down. The name comes from the fact that they actually produce hydrogen peroxide in one of the steps of the breakdown, and hydrogen peroxide is really toxic. You don't want to drink or ingest hydrogen peroxide. So that's an intermediate step. It takes these intoxicants, basically breaks them down into hydrogen peroxide, and then further breaks them down into nice water and oxygen, which is actually useful for cells. And they're really abundant, as you can see, in our detoxification organs, the liver and the kidneys. Okay, I think this is the last one, mitochondria. What do you guys have for mitochondria? This is a really easy one.
We did the power company.
Yeah, a power plant or power company. I don't think I've heard anything else. If anyone has another idea, let me know. We're basically making power for the cell, all right? These are the powerhouses of the cell. They're making ATP. ATP is the main energy molecule for cells. want to spend a little bit of time talking about mitochondria briefly. There's a couple of really important aspects that I want you to know. They have a double membrane. So most of these other organelles we talked about just have a single simple membrane. Mitochondria have a double membrane. So it's a little bit more complicated. I won't go into the details of the double membrane. Just know that it is double. And interestingly, they have their own DNA as well as ribosomes. So this is the only organelle that has its own DNA. Obviously the nucleus, but that's the DNA for the whole cell, right? Other than the mitochondria. So the mitochondria has its own DNA. We abbreviated mtDNA. And it's inherited from your mother. So the DNA you have in the mitochondria of all your cells in your body is just from your mother, which is really interesting. So it's maternally inherited. Your mitochondrial information is maternally inherited. And you don't need to know this, but I find it fascinating that the theory behind how mitochondria kind of they're like their own cell within a cell almost, because they can reproduce on their own with their own DNA. The theory called the endosymbiont theory is that a long time ago, there were these mitochondria living on their own. They were their own cell. A big cell came along and basically ate it. And rather than digesting it, it just started using it to use that mitochondria to start producing energy for itself. So that's why we have this kind of almost independent entity within our larger cell. So it's just kind of interesting. That's why it has DNA, whereas the rest of the organelles other than the nucleus do not. Okay, so powerhouses. These are making energy. And here's just a really brief picture. You can see the complicated inner membrane kind of weaving in and out there. All right, is that everything? I think that covers all the different organelles. So those are the organelles you want to be familiar with for the exam. The information on those slides is what you want to know. And hopefully this kind of helps you remember that information. I'm going to get into the cell membrane, like I said, Monday. And I also, moving away from this, I sent out emails to everyone about your disease video project group yesterday. So if you didn't get that, check your email. And I also posted them to Canvas. So under the pages tab here, these are the topics, and then the people working on these different topics are found under here. Your class was actually harder than the 8 a.m. class. A lot of you guys wanted like 3 or 4 of the same ones. So a lot of you may have like your second or third choice, but I got everyone within one of their top 3 choices. So that was my goal. Your outline for this is due February 26th. I'll give you a little bit more information about that, but I'll create an assignment where you'll upload it. Let me go here real quick. So if you want to get started on the outline here, hopefully you Zoom people a little closer. If you want to get started on the outline, these are kind of the main points you want to focus on. This is what you're going to put into your video. So you want a few bullet points under each of these basically for your outline for this first part of the project. And I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that as we get closer to it. But February 26th is when that's due. So kind of start getting the information together so you don't have to do a bunch of research last minute. And I think that's it. I'll have the study guide for the exam, which is next Friday, up today. So look for that. And that's it. Have a good weekend.